Dark Souls 3. Quite possibly the most ambitious From Software game yet. With this game bringing upon the end of the Souls series, and Dark Souls 2 falling flat, From Software has decided to take no chances, and played development games safe, using their most recent title Bloodborne as the game's foundation. Dark Souls 3 promises to make up for the shortcomings of Dark Souls 2, and they've made quite the apology. Dark Souls 3 takes the bells and whistles of Bloodborne and innovates greatly on it, reintroducing trick weapons, impressive aesthetics, captivating scenery, and continuing the game's story. As the protagonist, you no longer take the role of the chosen undead, but that of unkindled ash. You will rise from your tomb in the middle of the end, just after the Lords of Cinder are awakened, so they can keep the world from fading into darkness. You then venture out, leaving the graveyard to encounter your first batch of enemies, and then Boss, of which becomes your catalyst for venturing out further into the world as you continue collecting the 6 souls of the Lords of Cinder, so you too may have a chance of continuing the Age of Fire for just a little longer, or being the final nail in the coffin for submerging the world into darkness. The core of the game. The core goal and dynamic of Dark Souls is to make the player rejoice in their acts of self-accomplishment and achievement when they venture and fight through the world in clever and skillful ways. And in Dark Souls 3, they've still managed to keep up with the original game's formula, and it works great. Plenty of people complain that the Souls series is far too difficult and should be made easier, but I believe this sort of critique would be very damaging to the game's experience if the creators decided to listen to them. When the player dies in Dark Souls 3, it's always due to their lack of experience, timing, and understanding of the game's rules. It's never the game's fault, but the player's own. This due to a lot of the enemy's attacks being well coordinated and predictable, if you pay enough attention. While some may call this bad game design, it's something I find that makes the gameplay for Dark Souls 3, or any Souls title for that matter, extremely compelling and rewarding. As the lore of the story explain death and respawning in the world as a natural thing, to the player, it overpowers that feeling of incompetence for failure with the feeling of curiosity for developing a strategy. This allows the player to still feel pride in figuring out enemy attack patterns and devising a strategy for killing that same enemy, even though they have fallen to it time and time again. Such strategy development also applies for traversing the landscapes, which are nothing but varied and unique. A lot of fun can be had just trying to quicken your rush to the boss room after a failed attempt, keeping you engaged and motivated. So not only is this a basic gameplay element of death and respawning turned into a complex and intricate core mechanic to the game's enjoyment, they've also incorporated it as a canon part of their story's lore, which is not only amazing, but just a small demonstration of how essential the lore and the story is to the game itself. The lore of Dark Souls explains every strange world element that you'd normally question in real life if it wasn't for the fact that it was a video game. Even multiplayer is explained as being a temporary linking of two-dimensional timelines due to the strange temporal powers of humanity and the Embers, enabling this dimensional linkage by using colored soapstones, which is very neat. Dark Souls 3 is a proper send-off to such an amazing game series. The Souls titles will be inspiring game developers to come, as its amazing storytelling, gameplay elements, and overall aesthetics have come together to breathe life back into a game that had a pretty mediocre sequel, by going back to what made the first game work so well. A fair but difficult challenge. As a game designer, I could use plenty of gameplay and story elements that made Dark Souls 3 work well. Taking the small parts of my game and fleshing them out to their fullest potential, like making hidden minigames to keep the player engaged and entertained, or by using lore to explain such simple things as death and reincarnation. It could certainly give my game that extra bit of spice that separates it from the rest. And that's my review on Dark Souls 3.